Hello, welcome to TisTalk.
Welcome to TisTalk. This is a podcast coming from Tisbury, Wiltshire and surrounding villages. I'm Julianne Murphy.
And I'm Mary Myers. This is the week beginning Monday the 6th of October. So, hello Julianne.
Hello Mary.
How are things?
Very well. Good.
But sad. Well, I'm sad because this is your last TisTalk.
This is my last TisTalk. So shortly after celebrating our third year, Mary, of TisTalk, for me it's coming to an end.
Yeah, that's so sad. But it's been great, we should say. It's been great, 3 years. But I just want to ask you a little bit about, just sort of thinking back. So you've been here in Tisbury for how many years?
25 years. So I should say, not only is this the end of TisTalk, it's kind of the end of Tisbury for me because we're leaving. We've sold the flat and we're packing up. Well, we haven't got a completion date, but we are moving. So,
and you're moving to Ireland?
Yeah, we're moving to the west of Ireland, to a town about the same size as Tisbury. It's like an Irish version of Tisbury.
Right.
So,
is it really in the countryside, beautiful?
Very beautiful, by a lake, very nice.
Could it be said to be more beautiful than Tisbury?
No, it's not. It's not more beautiful. It's very beautiful in its own way.
Yeah.
But it's different. It's different. It's kind of wilder.
Right.
And it's not as green or as lush as Tisbury is.
Right.
Hard to beat Tisbury. We had Americans staying last week and they couldn't get over it. They couldn't get over Wardour. It was a beautiful day.
Yeah.
And really, they thought it was the most exquisite place.
Oh, they're not wrong.
No.
So, what brought you to Tisbury? I think you wanted to talk about Malcolm Poynter.
Yeah, well, if it hadn't been for Malcolm Poynter, or Mally, as he was, I wouldn't have ever come across Tisbury. So in the 80s, my cousin Lal Poynter, who was married to Mally eventually, but my cousin came across Mally and they went out together. And so in the 80s, kind of the middle of the 80s or late 80s, we started coming down here because Mally had the flat in Bridge House, the house next to the station with the balcony. So we used to come down here for the weekends now and again, and Tisbury kind of slowly became part of our lives, really. And then we were living in London, and then we were in Ireland, and then we came back in 1999, and we came back to Tisbury. So Mally lived in the flat, which he bought after he split up from his first wife, who was Penny Dorr. Now, we mentioned Penny Dorr last week because Julian Berry, she was a creative person, and she had rented space in the brewery from Julian Berry, as did Robert Tilliard. And they were all part of this same creative group. They used to go down the South-Western every Friday. There were a bunch of them. They were always there on a Friday. So you'd come down on the train from London on Friday night, go into straight into the South-Western, and all the same people would be there. And
sounds like a great creative spirit. Really nice, friendly.
It really friendly,
atmosphere.
Funny bunch of people. There was Robin, Carol, Ken. I don't know, endless people. They were all good fun, and. But maybe the most fun was Mally. It's a really nice, funny, jolly bloke. Generous. He loved partying. Often those Friday nights would end up in a sort of party back at Bridge House. He loved music, he loved dancing, he loved partying. So, and Mally was an artist. He was a graphic artist, really. And he loved pop art. He was a great comic collector and collector of toys, paintings. He's actually was generally a collector. Sadly, Mally died 10 years ago, and actually when I think back on it, most of that group in the southwestern are no longer with us, which is a bit sad. But luckily, Lal is still with us.
Yes.
My cousin, his wife, and of course it's Lal who does our What's-ons for us.
Yes. Where would we be without Lal Poynter?
Yeah.
I just have to say, will you miss us?
Of course I'll miss TisTalk. I'll miss you, Mary. I will really miss Tisbury. It's quite hard to leave. But, there are various reasons for that. But it will be hard. Really hard to leave Bridge House.
A new chapter.
A new chapter. And there was another thing we were going to talk about, Mary, which was nothing to do with me leaving, but to do with cinnamon buns.
Oh, yes.
We were talking about the cinnamon buns, weren't we? Because we both bought them.
Mm.
And then we were talking about Soul Bakery. And then it reminded me that I read an article but a few months ago, but we've never mentioned it or talked about it, that the Fonthill Estate has got, I hope I've got this right, have got planning permission to build a new service station where Soul Bakery was, and where Soul Bakery I think will be going back to. But it's going to be a big modern development, primarily for electric cars.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard about this.
So a hub for electric cars. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's exciting. Just the thought of those cinnamon buns is making my mouth water.
I know.
It's really weird.
I
must
think
be
I
hungry.
did a review that just talked about the cinnamon bun.
But anyway,
not that I'm obsessed.
We should say they are really delicious.
They're really, really good.
If a little expensive, but delicious.
Yeah.
So
and one does nearly feed two people.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So, Mary, what's on the programme today?
Okay, well, here's the list. And we've decided that although really you are the star of this last one, we are going to have me talking about a recent talk that I did to the History Society about my grandfather and about his exploits during the war.
And I'm really glad we've got that on because it's very interesting.
Oh, it's very nice for you to say. We did have a nice crowd at the History Society. So Alan Marion Davis has kindly interviewed me, and you're kindly going to edit it, and we have me talking. Secondly, we have Martin Thomas back again with another answer to a legal question, and this time the question is it better to be married or to live together from a sort of legal and tax point of view?
Okay.
And then thirdly, we have Steve Tonkin, who's back again talking about the night sky in October, and he's our lovely astronomer from the Cranborne Chase National Landscape. And then finally we have the What's-ons with Lal Poynter.
Our first story takes us back to the Second World War through the eyes of one remarkable man. Mary recently gave a talk at the Tisbury History Society about her grandfather, Geoffrey Myers. She called it A Quietly Extraordinary Life. From the Battle of Britain to intelligence work at Bletchley Park, here Mary recounts her talk to Alan Marion Davis.
Well, I was lucky enough to be at that talk you gave at the History Society the other day, and it was really very good indeed, very well received, lots of fascinating facts.
Thank you.
Too much to cover in this brief interview, but you talk about your grandfather as extraordinary, having quite an extraordinary life, which is a nice way of putting it. So tell us, how did he and his wife find themselves just there as the war was breaking out?
Okay, yeah. So I gave a talk about my grandfather, who I call Papy, because I'm half French, and although he was English, I always knew him in France, and I called my grandmother Mamie, who was French. So, but his real name was Geoffrey Myers, and he was born in 1905 and died in 1982. And the most extraordinary part of his life was during the war. So he met my grandmother when they were both in their 20s in Paris. They married, and when the war broke out, they were living in France. But then he joined the RAF and went to Britain and was in the RAF during the Battle of Britain. He wasn't a pilot, he was an intelligence officer. But he was also Jewish, so he was British and Jewish, and that also meant that his wife, my grandmother, was in extra danger being left in France because wives of British servicemen, they were being rounded up. And not only that, but she by then had half Jewish children, i.e. my father and his sister Anne. He was 5 and my aunt was 2. We're talking 1941 by this time. So there was the extraordinary aspect of my grandfather being at the Battle of Britain as an intelligence officer, and the fact that then he started writing these, what he calls his secret letters, which have actually been published by a BBC journalist called John Willis and published as a book called Secret Letters. And then there was the extraordinary part of his life, which was basically my grandmother's escape from France. And then subsequently, my grandfather was an intelligence officer at Bletchley Park.
Did he ever try to persuade your grandmother to leave France?
Yeah, so he did. Her story that I read out sort of began with a letter in code, which he wrote to her, telling her how to get out via Portugal. And he sent her money via the Daily Telegraph, who he was working for before the war and then after the war. He was a journalist, actually, all his life. And she did it, but it took her 7 months and a lot of trials and tribulations on the way.
Didn't it? There were some tense moments at times, weren't there? I mean, getting out. She had to cross the border into Vichy, France, didn't she? And then make her way across Vichy, France.
Where she was living was with her mother, and the house is still in the family. It's called Borpère. It's in the dead centre of France. It just happened to be on the demarcation line, very close to the demarcation line, 25 miles. And she got over with what was known as a passeur, people who lived near the border who would take money to smuggle people across. She went with a gamekeeper and she was told to dress in ordinary clothes, like a maid or something, as if she was just moving from one farm to another. My father on the saddle of a bike, who was being pushed by the gamekeeper's wife, and my aunt, as in my 2-year-old aunt, in a pushchair. And they walked many kilometres in the rain, as she remembers. And because it was raining, they weren't asked for their papers or anything, even though she had sort of false papers. And meanwhile, the gamekeeper himself went on foot through the woods with their real papers and met them on the other side. Then they dried off in a little cafe hotel on the other side. Then her adventures sort of began, but took 7 months with a variety of different transport methods. Taxis, trains, steam train across Spain, and some of it on foot. Then when they got to Portugal, they took 2 passenger boats that the British Army had laid on for civilians, which went in a convoy protected by air right up into the Atlantic, up to the Arctic Circle, and then into Glasgow.
A really wide arc to avoid the submarines.
Yes, and little did she know, she thought she was safe when she could see Glasgow in the distance, but actually that Clyde bit was mined, so there was danger at every moment.
Yes. So anyway, so your grandmother's story is pretty amazing, and you see that's already in another book, as it were. But getting back to your grandfather, how do things sort of shape up later on in the war?
Right. After the Battle of Britain, he then went to Bletchley Park as an intelligence officer. So he got an MBE for his services to the Bletchley Park intelligence effort.
Was that the code breaking?
Yeah. So although he wasn't actually one of the code brokers working with Alan Turing, who a lot of people will have remembered, he was working in what was then known as Hut 3, which was the crucial bit where decoded messages came in, often in German, and then he would translate them. But it wasn't so much just the language translating word for word, it was interpreting what these German coded messages actually meant. He interpreted as well as translated.
Yes. So that's where his intelligence officer...
That's right. And then Hut 3 had a direct link to the Cabinet Office and the decision makers,
yes,
right up to Winston Churchill.
And then after the war, then he then goes to America, doesn't he?
Yes, via Paris. He was on the staff of the Daily Telegraph and was Paris correspondent. And that lasted until 1965. And then he went to America, yes, as the correspondent for the UN at the Daily Telegraph. And then he retired in the 70s and went back to France again. And basically he was a big Francophile. He loved France. Of course, his life was this love affair with my grandmother and with France.
I mean, how does it make you feel now yourself, looking back on all that stuff, discovering all that stuff?
Well, a huge mix of emotions. So firstly, just an amazing sense of good luck that they survived, and that's why I'm here. Proud of him that he did this fantastic work with amazing dedication and feeling of duty, he was an amazing internationalist, very, very pro-France, pro-EU, which I am. Makes me regret even more this stupid Brexit. Also, the energy and dedication he put into covering the UN, the United Nations, which again now is being terribly knocked and devalued by that idiot Trump. But then, everyone should value the UN much more than they do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary. That's covered a lot of ground there, but all fascinating stuff. Thanks very much.
This is TisTalk from Tisbury, Wiltshire.
Of course, that was me in my personal capacity, and now back to presenting mode. We have Martin Thomas now, talking about legal questions. I'm back with Martin Thomas at Thomas & Co Solicitors, and here is another off-the-cuff question from Anne Martin. Is it better in law to be married than just living with someone?
Well, that depends whether you want to be married or just living with someone. Right. It's definitely different. So it's different in lots of ways, but the main ways are each other, children, and tax. And let's just do them, and death. Let's do them quickly. Okay. I don't want to give a great essay. If you're married to each other, then the law will have a voice when you stop being together. That's called a divorce. If you're just going out together, you can separate without the law having to have a voice. If there's children involved, it doesn't make that much difference. The law always has a voice when the parents of children stop being together, and that's true whether or not they're married.
Right.
It's a different bit of law, but there's always law. On tax, there's all sorts of differences, and different governments change it different ways, because some governments say that they sort of believe in marriage more than some other governments. But there are income tax differences and capital gains tax differences and other tax differences depending on whether or not people are married. And then finally, if you die without a will, dying without a will is called being intestate. And if you die intestate, there's rules about what happens to everything that you've got. They're different depending on whether or not you're married. Very briefly, if you're married and you die without a will, the person you're married to gets everything. If you're going out with someone and living with them but not married, they don't get everything and they might get nothing.
Right, so in that case, in the case of death, it's better to be married if you're the other person, if you're the spouse, I guess.
But I'm being very cynical. You're saying it's better to be married because you're assuming everybody is all lovey-dovey. If you're not sure you want to be with someone, then it's better not to be married to them.
Okay, all right. And going back to the tax thing, it also sounds more advantageous to be married than not to be, in terms of paying tax.
It depends where you are in the financial range, and if you're rich, so you're not worried about the welfare state or child benefits or things of that nature, then it's for tax overall it's better to be married.
Right. And if you're poor,
doesn't make so much difference,
right?
Because there's advantages and disadvantages each way.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, if your income is more in the middle range.
If your income's in the middle range, normally there's a tax advantage in being married.
Right, okay, that's interesting. Thank you very much, Martin.
Follow us on Instagram at TisTalk Radio.
October is a wonderful month for stargazing, and Steve Tonkin, astronomer at the Cranborne Chase Dark Skies Reserve, is here to guide us through what to look out for on crisp autumn nights.
Yeah, so, October's great. You know, it's a real celestial showcase for the beginning of autumn. And, you know, you've noticed the nights are getting longer and cooler. They get longer very rapidly around this time of year as well. But this is excellent conditions for stargazing. It's not yet too cold, and it's dark enough by 8 p.m, so, you know, unless you're very young and have a very earlier bedtime, then that's absolutely fine. Perversely, we have one of the summer constellations, which we call the Summer Triangle, which is three bright stars called Vega, Deneb and Altair. And they still dominate the evening sky. And because it gets darker earlier and earlier, but they're still visible overhead for the rest of the month, so that's really, really nice.
So how can you locate that? Vega?
Vega is, if you look almost overhead, there's one very, very distinct white star, brighter than anything else around it. And if you look carefully, just below it, there's a little parallelogram of fainter stars. If you got that, you've got Vega. And then you look to the left of Vega, and there is a yellowish star, nearly as bright, which is Cygnus. And then below those two, there's another, again, not so bright star, that's Altair, and it's easy to recognize because it's got a slightly fainter star either side of it, sort of like it's got two little outriders. Okay. And that's your summer triangle. So that's overhead. In the southeast, so I'm afraid you're not going to see that from the entrance to the Nadder Centre. You're going to have to go around the corner to the playing field.
Yes.
And from there, you'll notice it's a huge square of stars in the sky. Very, very, very distinct. And that is Pegasus, the flying horse, or it's most of Pegasus. And this really lets us know, the autumn constellations are coming. And if you look to the left of it, there's like two little strings of stars coming off the top left-hand corner. And that's the constellation of Andromeda. And with binoculars, you can just see, if you look at the brightest star in those strings, get that in the field of view of binoculars, and above it is a slightly fainter star. Get that one lower down, and you'll see this smudge of light in the sky, and that's the Andromeda Galaxy. So we're actually looking at another island universe, so we were once called. So it's huge. I mean, it's much bigger than our galaxy. It's got about 1 million stars in it, which is absolutely massive.
That many?
Yeah, that's not an exaggeration. 1 million stars. I mean, our galaxy's probably got a few 100,000 million.
Yes.
Which again, numbers we can't imagine. But this is great.
And it's the only galaxy we can see apart from our own. Is that right?
You can see it with the naked eye. So if the lights are out around here, look up there, give your eyes a chance to get dark adjusted, and you can actually see it relatively easily with your naked eye. And you're looking at light that it's been travelling towards us for 2.5 million years. So it's 2.5 million light years away.
What's the difference between a light year and our type of year?
Well, a light year is actually a distance. a light year is the distance light travels in a year. To give you some idea how unimaginable that is, light would travel 7.5 times around the Earth at the equator in 1 second. It takes 8 minutes and 19 seconds to get here from the sun. So the sun is 8 and a bit light minutes away. But we're talking about somewhere where light has travelled for 2.5 million years. And then somebody throws a bright light on and obliterates it. I mean, what a pity.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, now what else? Cassiopeia?
Well, Cassiopeia. So we're looking out from the Nadder Centre, from the entrance, just look high up in the sky, and there's it's actually more like a 3 at the moment, but it's a W. We'll always think of it as a W of stars. So it's this W of reasonably bright stars, and that is Cassiopeia, Queen of Ethiopia, I think, in the legend. And so if you take this W shape and as being 2 V's, as it were, the wider of the V's, if you look along the central line of that and you put up a hand and stretch your hand out in front of you, and a handspan away going along that way, you'll see another reasonably bright star, not that bright, and that's the pole star. That's the one that's above the North Point on the horizon. So it's a great one for finding direction, and people have used that possibly thousands of years. The wagon is the plough or the Big Dipper or the saucepan, whatever you want to call it, which at this time of year is really low on the horizon.
Okay.
And that's been a source of lots and lots of legends. One of my favourite ones is from North America, where it's actually part of the constellation of the Great Bear. 2 bears, Polaris, the pole star, is in the Little Bear. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the pictures of them, they've got long tails. And of course, bears don't have long tails. And the legend was that our lot, humans, were hunting the bears and had wounded them, and they went to one of the great gods and said, "Look, can you save us from these horrible people?" Which he did. But he took them by the tail, swung them round, which is how their tails got on, threw them into the sky. Yeah. So because the Big Dipper, which is part of the Great Bear, is low on the horizon, the legend is that the blood from the Great Bear's wounds falls onto the leaves of the trees, which is why the leaves go red in autumn. Well, it's just a way of trying to relate what's going on in the sky to what they see happening on Earth. And so go and look for that. Go and look for the Big Dipper, the Great Bear, and look for the reddened leaves during the daytime, and make that relationship for yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Steve.
This is TisTalk from Tisbury, Wiltshire.
Thanks, Steve. We'll certainly be looking up this month with those tips in mind. And finally, Lal Poynter is here with the What's-Ons.
On Tuesday the 7th, chair yoga is back at the Hinton Hall from 11:15 to 12:15 for gentle exercise, and that's organised by the Memory Group. And at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the Parish Council meeting is in the reading room on the High Street. All are welcome. On Wednesday the 8th at 9:30 a.m, TisBus shopping outing is going to Bath. And at 10 a.m. to 12 noon, the pop-up cafe is in the Hinton Hall, organised by the Memory Group. On Thursday the 9th, 7 for 7:30, the Tisbury Natural History Society talk will be about restoring rivers, with Connor Goddard from the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust at the Victoria Hall. On Saturday the 11th at 7:30 p.m, play on film, that's from the National Theatre Live, it will be Inter Alia with Rosamund Pike. On Sunday the 12th, it's Apple Day, from 10 till 12 noon on the King George V playing field. Come along with a couple of sterilised bottles and a bag of apples to have them pressed into apple juice. Also, you can arrange to borrow the village press if you have a glass of apples in your own garden. And there will be a stall where you can pick up an apple cake or a muffin and try your hand at quiz or apple-related skill. This is organised by Tisbury Parish Council. And later on Sunday, 6:30 for a 7 p.m. start, The Magic Lantern film will be All We Imagine as Light, and that will be at the Victoria Hall. And looking a bit ahead, make a note in your diary to vote in the Neighbourhood Plan referendum on October the 23rd. And the British Royal Legion are looking for volunteers for the Poppy Appeal between the 27th of October and the 11th of November. Contact Louise Downton on poppylass@btinternet.com if you can help with house-to-house or street collections. And that's all for this week.
That's all from us. We've been Julianne Murphy
and Mary Myers, and special guest interviewer Alan Marion Davis, and thanks to Lal Poynter, and of course remembering her late husband Malcolm Poynter.